In today's video, we're diving into Karens who died in dumb ways. From a Karen who ignored every microwave safety warning to a Karen who refused to listen about her deadly allergy, her stubborn decisions backfired in the craziest way possible. It was June 12, 2016, in a quiet suburban neighborhood in Tampa, Florida. The afternoon heat pressed down on the residential streets as families retreated indoors to escape the humidity. Inside a modest two-story home, 49-year-old Vintel Lewis was preparing what she believed would be an educational demonstration for her online followers. Vintel worked in home decor resale and had built a reputation for being outspoken about consumer issues. She frequently posted videos challenging what she saw as corporate deception, often filming confrontations with service technicians. The attention, both supportive and critical, fueled her growing online presence and reinforced her confidence in her own conclusions. Days earlier, Vintel confronted the appliance repair technician inside her kitchen while recording on her phone. She accused him of inflating service costs by exaggerating safety risks and insisted she would expose what she described as dishonest industry practices. When he explained that operating a microwave with its outer casing removed could result in lethal electrocution, particularly from the high-voltage capacitor that can retain charge even after being unplugged, she repeatedly interrupted him and demanded technical proof beyond manufacturer warnings. The technician declined to proceed after she refused to sign the required liability waiver for internal servicing. Later that evening, she uploaded edited footage of the exchange, framing the warning as a scare tactic designed to pressure customers into unnecessary repairs. In the comment section, she encouraged viewers to question appliance safety guidelines and stated she would demonstrate that the risk was overstated. That afternoon, she set up recording equipment in her kitchen and prepared to recreate the scenario. Using a screwdriver, she removed the microwave's outer shell, exposing internal wiring, the transformer, and the high-voltage capacitor. Safety labels were clearly visible along the metal chassis. She then deliberately bypassed the door interlock switch, the mechanism designed to prevent operation when the door is open, believing it existed to restrict performance rather than protect users. Her adult daughter stood several feet away, filming from a second angle as Vintel leaned toward the exposed circuitry. The kitchen light reflected sharply off the bare metal components, now energized and unshielded. With the camera rolling, Vintel placed a metal bowl inside the open microwave cavity and activated the unit. Almost immediately, electrical arcing formed inside the exposed chassis. A sharp snapping sound followed as insulation began to fail and light smoke rose from the wiring. Instead of stepping back, Vintel reached toward the exposed transformer while it remained energized. Her hand made contact with wiring carrying over 2,000 volts. The current locked her muscles, causing her to collapse onto the tile floor. She gasped and convulsed as the shock disrupted her heart's rhythm. Video later reviewed by investigators showed brief, involuntary movement before she became unresponsive. Her daughter rushed to shut off the power as smoke thickened near the ceiling. Insulation near the transformer began to smolder, producing additional smoke but remaining confined to the internal wiring area. By the time the power was cut, Vintel lay motionless beside the appliance. Emergency services were called immediately. Fire crews arrived within 8 minutes, containing the localized kitchen fire before it spread beyond the immediate area. Resuscitation efforts began on scene. According to the incident report, she entered ventricular fibrillation and did not regain a stable rhythm despite advanced life support. She was pronounced dead shortly after arrival at the hospital. Investigators later confirmed the safety interlock had been deliberately bypassed and the high-voltage system energized during contact. The medical examiner determined that death resulted from cardiac arrhythmia triggered by electrocution. The incident was ruled accidental, noting that factory safety mechanism had been intentionally disabled. It was May 25, 2018, along Florida's Gulf Coast, Memorial Day weekend had brought record crowds to a popular marine aquarium. Families filled the exhibits under bright afternoon sun, with temperatures in the mid-80s, creating ideal conditions for outdoor attractions and scheduled presentations. 50-year-old Clarette Dawn arrived with her extended family during Memorial Day weekend, dressed in a lightweight cover-up over swim-ready attire. A travel content creator, she frequently filmed immersive destination reviews for her online audience, often seeking closer access than typical visitors. Her family was accustomed to her tendency to test policy boundaries when she believed guest restrictions were negotiable rather than absolute. The aquarium's main attraction was a large dolphin habitat used for scheduled educational presentations. Prominent signage stated that guest interaction and platform access were restricted to trained personnel only. Waist-high barriers separated visitors from the water, and alarmed, self-latching gates secured the staff-only walkways above the pool, which extended more than 15 feet at its deepest point. Clarette had researched dolphin swim programs offered at similar facilities and anticipated she might be able to arrange closer access for her channel. When staff explained that interactive programs required advance booking and were not included with general admission, she argued that as a paying guest, she should be allowed limited platform access for filming. She maintained that supervised entry for content creation was a reasonable request and believed the restriction was flexible rather than absolute. Security responded as visitors paused to watch. While staff attempted to de-escalate, a marine trainer exited through a staff-only gate to reposition equipment. As the gate closed behind him, Clarette quickly followed before it fully latched, stepping onto the restricted platform above the water. Witnesses shouted warnings. Trainers radioed for emergency response while moving toward her. Ignoring repeated instructions to return, she moved farther along the narrow walkway, continuing her live stream. When security reached the secured gate, they had to wait for controlled access from inside. Without authorization, Clarette lowered herself from the platform's edge and dropped into the pool, feet first, without flotation support. Witness footage later showed her striking the back of her head against the concrete edge during entry before submerging. The impact and sudden immersion left her visibly disoriented. Although the water was not dangerously cold, she surfaced breathing hard and looking around as if unsure where the nearest exit ladder was located. Her movements appeared unsteady as her breathing became increasingly frantic against the smooth habitat walls. During repeated attempts to breathe, she aspirated water and submerged. When she resurfaced, her movements appeared slowed and poorly coordinated. Staff deployed flotation devices, while a designated rescue diver entered from a controlled ladder. Within approximately 90 seconds, responders reached her as she slipped beneath the surface again. She was lifted from the pool as personnel initiated CPR on the deck. Paramedics transported her to a nearby hospital. Physicians later determined she sustained a head injury during entry and subsequently aspirated water while disoriented, resulting in prolonged oxygen deprivation and hypoxic brain injury. Despite advanced life support, she did not recover. The investigation concluded she had bypassed barriers, followed authorized personnel through a secured access point, ignored instructions, and entered a restricted habitat without authorization. A safety review confirmed that circulation systems, intake covers, alarms, and infrastructure met regulatory standards. The death was ruled accidental following unauthorized entry into a restricted area. After required inspections and coordination with authorities, the dolphin exhibit resumed operations. Portions of her live stream were reviewed as part of the official report, documenting the sequence of events preceding the incident. It was April 15th, 2015, at a community recreation center in Boulder, Colorado. Late afternoon light filtered through tall windows, stretching across polished hardwood floors lined with evenly spaced yoga mats. Ceiling fans hummed softly above the quiet murmur of participants settling into place for a beginner inversion workshop. Along one wall, reinforced padding had been installed specifically for supported headstand practice. 48-year-old Dexton Swale arrived early and positioned her mat directly in the center of the room, rather than near the padded wall area reserved for beginners. She owned a small retail business and was known among acquaintances for turning routine situations into confrontations. In previous classes, she had openly challenged instructors, correcting cues and dismissing safety reminders as overcautious. She often framed structured guidance as incompetence and had begun attending the workshop with the stated goal of proving that foundation drills were unnecessary for someone with her level of fitness. Over the prior weeks, she had ignored repeated recommendations to build shoulder strength and practice supported inversions first. During warm-ups that afternoon, she interrupted alignment corrections and questioned why experienced adults were being instructed in what she considered an overly simplified manner. Several participants shifted uncomfortably as the instructor calmly reiterated that unsupported headstands carried significant risk without proper conditioning and wall support. The instructor emphasized that falls from vertical alignment could drive axial force directly into the cervical spine. When the time came to practice, most students moved to the padded wall section. Dexton remained in the center of the hardwood floor rather than moving to the padded wall area. She declined foam blocks and brushed away the instructor's offer to spot her entry. Witnesses later stated that her tone had grown sharper as she insisted she did not need assistance. She planted her forearms and interlocked her fingers, placing the crown of her head on the floor. With a controlled kick upward, she lifted both legs into a freestanding headstand. For several seconds, she maintained vertical balance. Then her right elbow shifted slightly outward on the smooth surface, narrowing her base of support. Her hips drifted forward past center. Without wall contact to stop rotation, her body tipped beyond vertical. Witnesses reported that she attempted to correct by arching backward, but the adjustment accelerated the fall. Her full body weight drove downward as the top of her head struck the hardwood floor. Several participants later reported hearing a heavy impact followed by sudden silence. She collapsed immediately. Students described her eyes open and fixed for several seconds, but she did not move her arms or legs. Her breathing became shallow and irregular. The instructor stabilized her head and instructed others to call emergency services while preventing anyone from attempting to lift her. Responders arrived within 12 minutes and applied full spinal immobilization before transport. En route, she required assisted ventilation due to compromised respiratory effort. Hospital imaging later confirmed a severe fracture at the C1 to C2 level with spinal cord involvement near the brainstem. Despite surgical intervention and mechanical ventilation in intensive care, swelling at the injury site and confirmed spinal cord disruption resulted in loss of independent breathing. After 2 days on life support, Dexton Swale was pronounced deceased. Investigators documented that repeated safety warnings about unsupported inversions had been provided during the session. The medical examiner ruled the death an accidental recreational injury caused by complications of a high cervical spine fracture sustained during the fall. It was October 20th, 2018, in a residential subdivision in Mesa, Arizona. The late afternoon desert sun cast long shadows between the uniform houses as temperatures eased from the day's peak heat. The quiet neighborhood streets were lined with manicured lawns and carefully maintained driveways, where the soft ticking of cooling engines and the hiss of sprinkler systems filled the background. A licensed drone contractor was conducting a limited pilot delivery test in coordination with a regional retail partner. The aircraft descended to approximately 20 feet above a concrete driveway as part of a controlled demonstration approved for the neighborhood. The operator maintained visual line of sight while preparing to complete the programmed release sequence under temporary FAA authorization. 56-year-old Nancy Quab emerged from her adjacent property, immediately confronting the operator about what she believed was unauthorized surveillance. Nancy served on the local homeowners association board and had developed a reputation for aggressively policing neighborhood activity. Her confrontational approach to perceived violations had created ongoing friction with residents and service providers. Nancy had previously filed multiple complaints regarding delivery trucks, landscaping crews, and what she described as aerial spying. She often recorded interactions on her phone, convinced documentation would validate her position in formal disputes. Minor disagreements frequently escalated under her watch. As the drone hovered over the designated drop zone, Nancy grabbed a metal rake from beside her garage and advanced toward the driveway. Several neighbors began filming from doorways and windows as her raised voice echoed across the street. The operator moved to maintain distance as the aircraft continued operating lawfully, with the spinning rotors posing a clear safety risk. Despite the visible blades and loud rotor noise, Nancy swung the rake upward into the rotor assembly. The strike shattered a propeller and disrupted the drone's stabilization. The aircraft lurched sideways, clipped the edge of the driveway, and slammed down hard on the concrete. The impact cracked the outer casing and damaged the lithium battery pack. Shortly after impact, the damaged battery pack began venting white-gray smoke. A brief flare ignited at the fracture point, remaining confined to the damaged battery housing as it discharged. The flames remained concentrated around the wreckage rather than spreading outward. Startled by the sudden burst of heat and smoke, Nancy stepped backward quickly. Her heel caught on the slight lip where the driveway met the garage slab. Off balance and already leaning away from the smoke, she fell straight back. Witness videos, later reviewed by investigators, showed her head striking the concrete without her arms breaking the fall. The impact was clearly audible on multiple recordings. The drone fire continued to burn in a contained pool of flame a few feet away, gradually diminishing as the battery exhausted itself. The operator called emergency services while keeping bystanders clear of the smoking debris. A neighbor used a garden hose to cool the wreckage once the flames subsided. Nancy remained unresponsive on the driveway. Paramedics arrived approximately 9 minutes after the 911 call and initiated advanced life support. According to the medical examiner's findings, she sustained a severe occipital skull fracture with associated intracranial bleeding. She was pronounced dead at the scene. The death was ruled accidental, caused by blunt force trauma sustained during a backward fall. Investigators confirmed through multiple witness recordings that Nancy had initiated physical contact with the aircraft, and the operator was found to be compliant with federal and local regulations. It was November 17th, 2016, in Amarillo, Texas. A cold front had pushed through the panhandle that afternoon, dropping temperatures into the low 40s. By early evening, a neighborhood supermarket glowed under fluorescent lighting as employees prepared for closing. Brenda Harlow, 47, arrived shortly after sunset to pick up groceries for the week. She lived in a gated subdivision and served on her homeowners association board. Former co-workers described her as organized and persistent, especially when challenging policies she believed were flexible. In retail settings, she often escalated minor inconveniences into formal complaints. That evening, she wore a thick winter coat, leggings, and open-toed sandals. While selecting frozen vegetables and packaged meals, she fixated on glare, reflecting off the glass doors, and loudly accused the store of misleading presentation because she could not clearly read labels. A clerk explained that extra stock was kept in a staff-only walk-in freezer. Brenda demanded access, insisting she had a right to inspect unopened cases herself and threatening to contact corporate. The shift supervisor refused, citing safety rules and liability. Brenda photographed his name tag and announced she would report the store for unsafe customer conditions. Moments later, as an employee pushed a pallet jack through the stockroom doors, Brenda slipped in behind him without authorization. Surveillance later confirmed she entered the restricted area alone. The walk-in freezer measured roughly 12 by 14 feet and operated at about -5 degrees Fahrenheit. The insulated door was self-closing and equipped with a required interior safety release, designed to open from the inside. Several large boxes had been stacked near the doorway, partially limiting clear access to the release plate. After the door sealed shut, Brenda turned and struck it with her palm. She reached for the interior release, but had to maneuver around the stacked boxes to apply pressure. As she shifted her footing, frost near the threshold caused her sandal to slip. She fell backward and struck the back of her head against a metal storage rack. Surveillance footage showed her sitting upright for nearly a minute before standing unsteadily. She reached again for the release. Without gloves, her exposed hands struggled to maintain sustained pressure while repositioning around the boxes. Twice, she appeared to press the mechanism, but did not hold it long enough to disengage the latch. Investigators later confirmed the release functioned properly when unobstructed and fully depressed. Over the next hour, her movements became slower and less coordinated. Investigators later noted that prolonged exposure at that temperature would steadily impair coordination and judgment. Combined with the earlier head injury, her ability to operate the release mechanism likely deteriorated. She alternated between attempts to stand and periods seated against the shelving, remaining in contact with the cold concrete floor. Nearly 2 hours after entry, surveillance showed her lowering to the floor within a few feet of the door and remaining there. By the time an overnight stalker entered more than 2 hours after she went inside, Brenda was unresponsive. Emergency responders pronounced her dead at the scene. During autopsy, the medical examiner documented a 2-inch scalp laceration and findings consistent with a mild concussion. The injury was not fatal, but was determined to have contributed to temporary disorientation and slowed reaction time during the exposure. The official report listed accidental hypothermia as the cause of death, with head injury noted as a contributing factor. Core temperature in the low 80s Fahrenheit was consistent with prolonged exposure. Store management later received a safety citation for partially obstructing the interior release and improper storage. No criminal charges were filed. It was July 15th, 2016, when the humid Charleston evening air hung thick over the bustling waterfront district. The popular seafood restaurant was packed with tourists and locals alike, drawn by fresh catches and harbor views. Inside, the clatter of dishes mixed with animated conversations as servers weaved between crowded tables. Helena Morrow, a 50-year-old business owner known for her direct manner and impatience with what she considered unnecessary precautions, had arrived with 2 close friends for their monthly dinner gathering. Helena had built her company through decisive action and rarely second-guessed herself, traits that had served her well in business, but sometimes put her at odds with others' advice. Years earlier, Helena had been diagnosed with a severe shellfish allergy after an emergency room visit that required treatment. Her physician prescribed an epinephrine auto-injector and advised strict, lifelong avoidance of shellfish. Helena also had a documented history of asthma, a condition known to increase the severity of allergic reactions, though she rarely mentioned it and had not experienced a serious flare in years. When their server approached, standard allergy protocols were initiated. After Helena casually mentioned her prior allergy while asking about the shrimp special, the server clarified whether it was life-threatening. Upon learning she had once carried epinephrine, the server notified the manager. The manager reviewed the menu disclaimers, explained the risks, and recommended several non-shellfish alternatives. The kitchen stood ready to mark the order as an allergy alert if needed. Helena dismissed the concerns. She insisted she had likely outgrown the allergy and believed her earlier reaction had been exaggerated. When reminded she once carried epinephrine, Helena admitted she no longer kept one with her. Despite repeated offers to substitute her entree, she firmly stated she understood the risks and wanted the shrimp as prepared. The manager documented her refusal before allowing the order to proceed. The kitchen prepared the shrimp normally, and Helena began eating with visible satisfaction. Within minutes, she felt tingling around her lips and tightness in her throat. Assuming it was minor, she continued eating, rather than stopping. The symptoms escalated quickly. Her voice grew hoarse, and swelling developed around her lips and eyes. She began coughing and wheezing, struggling to draw full breaths. Her asthma compounded the reaction, intensifying airway constriction. Over the next several minutes, her breathing became increasingly labored and audible, and she appeared flushed and disoriented. Staff recognized the severe allergic reaction and called 911 immediately. As Helena's condition worsened, she became dizzy and hypotensive, slumping forward in her chair. Paramedics arrived promptly and administered intramuscular epinephrine, oxygen, and additional medications for suspected anaphylaxis before transporting her to the nearest hospital. At the emergency department, physicians initiated aggressive treatment, including repeated epinephrine dosing and advanced airway management as swelling progressed. Despite rapid intervention, Helena developed severe anaphylactic shock that did not respond to repeated treatment, resulting in prolonged oxygen deprivation. Resuscitative efforts continued, but she did not recover. Helena was pronounced dead later that evening. The medical examiner confirmed her documented shellfish allergy and asthma through medical records. The official cause of death was listed as anaphylaxis due to shellfish exposure in a patient with underlying asthma. The manner of death was ruled accidental. The restaurant completed an incident report and cooperated with routine insurance and regulatory review. Documentation showed staff followed allergy protocols, offered alternatives, and recorded Helena's refusal of recommended precautions. Within days, operations returned to normal following routine regulatory review. Thanks for watching. Want to see more? Click on your screen now.